Especially to our panelists for being here. Thanks to everybody else too. And if we've got folks following the video, welcome as well too. So this will be the fifth teaching and learning roundtable for the year. The first two focused on online learning, kind of designing and facilitating online learning. And the second two focused on really integration of writing, within instruction. April Schmidt really facilitated that, and then we've got a two-part series going here on research, obviously. And the first focus today will really be like, how in the world do you find time to do any research, as a teacher at Bethel. And then April 28th will be our next meeting then. And those that are here today, I hope you'll come back. And April 28th, it'll be same time, same place. And then the focus will be a little more each of these folks sharing just some of their strategies, how they go about really conducting their research. So that's the big plan. So we're going to first have each of them introduce themselves, just name, department, real briefly what their research interests are, what kind of methodologies they use. I've given them a whopping 2 to 3 minutes to do that, so that'll be pretty quick. And then we'll jump into the one question that we've got today, and that's really how they think about and how they go about doing research and still, being gainfully employed as a teacher here at Bethel too. So that would be our one question. I think one thing that would be important is that it be interactive in what we do here. So we're not, folks that are here or panelists, I want you to feel free to jump in with questions or comments on what someone else says too. So it's not meant to be just this turn-taking, the entire time, but it's meant to be an interactive time. So we're small enough where we can certainly do that. So jump in. Okay. So Sarah, if we could maybe just start with you a little bit.
Sure.
Introduction-wise.
I'm Sarah Shady, and I am a professor in the philosophy department. I direct our honors program, and I sit on faculty senate as well. So in addition to those things, some of the research that I've been doing in the last 5 or 6 years is really around issues of interfaith engagement. A lot of that has been about pedagogical practices for introducing students to religious traditions that are different from their own, the value and benefit and tensions that come out of that. More theoretically, some issues of civic pluralism, how do we live well together as people of very different faith traditions, issues of Christian privilege and how that affects our relationships with persons of other faiths. A lot of my work ends up integrating philosophical theory with really practical issues. So some of the philosophers that I work with are Martin Buber and Martha Nussbaum, and thinking about their work and how it relates to issues of interfaith engagement, both inside the classroom and outside of the classroom. And one of the traits about my own style of doing research is that most of my publications have been collaborative, and I know many of you know I usually publish with Marian Larson, and we have we just haven't yet run out of things to write about and do together, which is exciting. So I've got a lot of experience working collaboratively.
Okay, I'm Kristenpano, and I teach in the nursing department. And I have a very fun and diverse role. I teach in the classroom and in the skills lab and the clinical and the simulations. And then my research area is primarily cardiovascular, which is a huge area, and initially on evidence-based guidelines, how to get them into practice for cardiac monitoring. So taking a look at what the American Heart Association is saying we should be doing and why aren't we doing it, and how can we make that easier to really implement them. So that's one area, and I've been, and I have to say that my research is always collaborative, and it always comes out of a need or a gap. And so I've been so fortunate. I'm almost blessed with too many opportunities, to be honest. If you get in the niche where there's a need, there's just more than enough work to be done. And so, for example, with the cardiac monitoring, what I did was I emailed one of the primary authors of the cardiac monitoring guidelines and said, hey, I need help figuring out how we should do this. And eventually said, oh, by the way, if you need any hospital sites, I volunteer ours. Then I quickly checked with the hospital director to see if that was okay. So sometimes you're jumping in before you really are ready, just as options come up. And then most recently I'm doing work with patients with left ventricular assist device, like Cheney had. His was a bridge to transplant, and so it's kind of a new population of patients, and my area is quality of life. That's what I went. That's what I studied in my doctorate. And there is no disease-specific quality of life measure for these patients. And so Minneapolis Heart Institute, who I've been working with the aortic stenosis patients, invited me to come aboard and design the part of the trial that had to do with quality of life. And we decided we had to make one. We had to write a questionnaire because one didn't exist. And to do that correctly, we had to ask the patients and start qualitative. So I was trained quantitative. Fortunately, I did have 2 qualitative classes at the university. And then I had to bring Barb Hoagland, who is a professor in our department, into the study so that she could mentor me in qualitative methodology. So I'm constantly learning all as I go along. And so I'm excited about this new arm.
I'm Brian Turnquist, and I'm in the Math and Computer Science department. My research is in what's called scientific computing. So it's basically mathematics and computer science applied to computational problems in the sciences. The particular area that I work in is neurophysiology, and in particular within neurophysiology, sensation. So I work with a broad network of researchers internationally. We're studying sensation both in the peripheral nervous system and also in the central nervous system, the brain. And it's an extremely difficult computational problem because of the huge quantity of signals that are being transmitted and received within the body all the time. And so what I do is develop algorithms to filter those signals, and also develop robotic controllers to provide stimuli to the subjects, and then measure the resulting responses. So I've been doing that probably 15 years now. And just recently, so most of what I've done has been in the central nervous system, brain, and with humans and fMRI, and then also peripheral nervous system with animals. And just this year, I'm also getting into something called microneurography, where we can actually interact with awake human subjects to ask them about the effective nature of the sensation that they're having, and then correlate that with the electrical signals that are being received in the spine and in the brain. So that's what I've been doing just this past year, but it's more or less all related to the same discipline, and it's a lot of the same people.
Can I ask a question? Mm-hmm. I want to know, are they under MRI at the time then, or what?
Yep. So for the functional MRI, they are awake, and we may have them give some effective rating. Let's say if the sensation we're studying is itch, the itch sensation to let's say they have a histamine injection to say on a scale of 1 to 10 how itchy it is, and then we look at the functional MRI and to see how that correlates and where in the brain and what sort of cross cortical processing is going on. And sometimes, I've done it myself too, and of course in the brain it's extremely difficult to figure anything out. At one time I had wool socks. I was wearing wool socks when I was being tested, and my feet were itching like crazy because they were brand new wool socks, and I couldn't even feel the histamine injection. All I could feel was my feet itching. And I told them afterwards, and they said, okay, well, we won't use that. And I said, but how often does that happen? Yeah. And so it's in the brain it's extremely difficult. In the peripheral nervous system, it's still difficult, but at least the psychological aspect of it isn't a part of what we do.
I'm Rollin King. Like Ryan, I do computational science, but I'm in the chemistry department, so I do some high-performance computing and computations and calculations of all kinds of interesting chemical properties. And that's probably it for now.
Paul Eddy, in the Bible Theology Department. I do nothing with computers. I would say over the last 18 years of my research, it's kind of had three phases, three kind of different areas. Began on kind of the philosophical side of my discipline, so philosophical theology, and looked at Christian responses to other religions, and how different folks have proposed Christians do that. And so that was my first world of such. I then jumped to a completely different area of New Testament research and historical reliability questions of the Gospels. So I had to learn there really different methods about historical research that I had never got into before. And now, in the last 4 years, have moved to an area of theology, really, kind of exploring the theology of sexuality. And it's an area, I think, that by and large, at least in our evangelical circles, we often jump right from Bible to ethics on that question without spending a lot of time asking the theological worldview stuff around sexuality. So that's my current project.
And I'm Carol Young from the psychology department, and I'm a cognitive psychologist. So my research particularly centers on the processes of memory in the human, and lately most of the threads that I've had going have been asking the question of how we search through our databases of knowledge that we have stored, how we come up with the bits of information that we need, and then how do we stop searching? Because I kind of that was the part that for decades of memory research had kind of been neglected, but came to my attention as a grad student when I would write these little computer programs to do things for me, and I'd write these little do loops, which the machine would get stuck in because I didn't write the proper exit through from it, right? And so do loops got kind of interesting to me, and I thought, well, but the brain doesn't have a do loop, and if you get, the brain fortunately doesn't get stuck in on a question, even if it can't come up with an answer. It does have some kind of exit strategy. So that's what I started researching, is how do we stop searching for a piece of information that we can't come up with. So most of my research is experimental with human participants again.
Okay, thanks. Well, the main question, I think we'll jump right into that. Again. And whoever would like to pick up on it, the first question, let's go with that, and then we'll go kind of in random order. You can decide when you want to come in. You may want to follow up on something someone else has said or take us in a new direction. We're not going to go up and down the row here necessarily. But the main question was, how are you able to conduct high-quality research at Bethel, which I think we've got going here. These individuals, and a lot of other individuals, by the way, at Bethel, it's amazing. We don't have anybody out of physics represented here or some other disciplines, but as you know, we've got some world-class research going on. But anyhow, how are you able to conduct high-quality research at Bethel amid the competing demands of excellence in teaching and in service? Okay, so that's the question. We're really going to focus on the rest of our time. So if somebody can start us off, and then, like I said, it's really meant to, for you to jump in that you want, and folks on the panel jump in as well too. So would somebody like to just get us rolling here?
I can go back to the beginning. For me, one of the most painful things I did when I came to Bethel was to shift my research focus away from my dissertation. I did my dissertation, got it published. When I came to Bethel, I was looking at the nature of the major that we have, which is a 4-year university degree in computer science or math, and my dissertation topic was graduate school. You need to be in graduate school to understand my dissertation. And so for about a year, I kind of cast it around, how am I going to do research and teach? And I finally came to the decision I need to shift my research area closer to what I teach. And I did that, and I don't regret it at all. And now I regret that I didn't do my dissertation in that area, because then it would have been that much farther along. But I think that was one thing that I did early on that I haven't regretted.
I'll just say, see these dark circles? I'm going to be honest and say it's Where your passion is, that's where your time is reflected. And so you just need to decide for yourself, depending on what else is going on in your life, how many hours in a week that you have. And so for me, practically speaking, I have to clump things. I'm kind of really into C's right now, the C's for bridging. So clumping, if you can clump your schedule, so you can have a day or half a day to dedicate to your research. I can't work in an hour or two. I barely get into what I was revising, and then my time's up. I just can't. It's not worth it. I've learned that. And so for me, it's clumping hours. Sometimes it's a weekend, and I have a very supportive spouse. And then other C's, just that your contacts are people that you work with that you can trust, and I find myself working with a lot of the same people over and over. And another C would be collaborative projects, so it has to be a project that's actually meaningful. Otherwise, it's not going to get done. And so, for example, patients that are on QT prolonging drugs are at risk for cardiac death by prolonging the part of their waveform that is dangerous if an early beat falls on there. And so that made us very motivated as clinicians and researchers to come together at Alina and quickly deal with this problem. So a collaborative project that's actually has a beneficial outcome is helpful, and a time element and then cash is the final C. So who's got funding available? That's another motivator, and then your timelines kind of fit into that track as well. And some of the funding agencies, they want to see something after 1 year, and so that's a motivator as well. So. I really use my summers and, unfortunately, a little of my spring break. And I'm trying to time now a break in some of the more intensive work that I'm doing. Right now I'm working with the American Heart Association, co-chairing a writing group to revise the standards for cardiac monitoring. They need to be updated. And so hopefully by the end of the summer, or maybe in the middle of the summer, a lot of that reworking and rewriting will be done.
If anybody wants to throw in any thoughts about funding and how you go after that too, I mean, that's part of the equation, so feel free to talk about that too.
Well, Jim Reinhout used to call it prostituting ourselves. And what he meant by that is that he wasn't allowed to apply for NSF grants while he was here, but he would work with people who were. And although that's not my phrase, that has been my primary recipe for success. So I have friends and collaborators at major research universities who do all the grant proposal writing and get the money, but they don't have any more time than we do, as busy as we think they are. They're writing grant proposals at 2 o'clock in the morning. So there is, in the sciences, there's money there anyway, and probably in any field there are ideas, and there's a need for expertise and for people who want to work in areas. So I've maintained a network of people, and a great plus is that network of people provides summer research opportunities and graduate school placements and access to fellowships and things like that for the students that are coming through. And so that, for me, that's been I would say the key to success. Not that it's not a lot of work, and you have to want to do it anyway.
I think related to that is that when you have collaborators at, let's say, a major research university, they're under the gun because of their funding requirements, which usually renew every 3 years or so. So they're constantly, as you say, writing grants, trying to do research. And they just have a very different mindset and timeline about how things go than in a teaching university like Bethel. And so one of the good things about collaborating with them is they kind of keep your feet to the fire on getting stuff done, because they'll say to me, we've got this problem, can you work on this problem, can you solve this problem? And like 2 days later, they're asking me if I've solved it yet. Like, I just prepped for a class, and I got lectures today, so no. And they're complaining because they have a seminar to some grad students that week. And but I tell them, okay, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. And I think that there's something to that. I think of having somebody who's asking you, is it done? How's it going?
Oh, yeah.
Because otherwise, if it's just left to me, all the things that are more urgent, like, I got to get this exam graded so I can get back the next class period and all this stuff. I think that kind of stuff can kind of fill all your time?
My research doesn't really bring in money or actually require a whole lot. I'm able to do what I need to do with the smaller grants from the Alumni Association or from the Professional Development Committee. Usually what I need money for is to motivate my subjects to do a good job at my tasks. So that's all that I use cash for. But on the topic of collaboration, I wanted to just add a couple of thoughts that I had about that too, because in the last few years, I had very good collaborations as a graduate student, and then for a couple of years after that with people that I started with in grad school, and then a lot of years of just being on my own and trying to do the research by myself. And then 3 or 4 years ago, connected with another individual whose research I read and realized was right up my alley and would be a great collaborator if he was interested in it. And so just emailed tentative, are you interested in this topic? And here's what I've been doing, and what would you think? Really short, just because they are extremely busy people, even though everything they're doing is research. And that turned out very positive, and so we've gotten some experiments going together between the two of us too. So just to add one little new thing, though, to this idea, put in your thoughts about collaborating. This particular individual was right in the area that I was doing research in, and so knows all the theories and all the other stuff, the research that's been done in that area. But I've also found it helpful to talk about my research with people, with my colleagues in other disciplines here at Bethel, who listen to my ideas and can just evaluate them from kind of a thoughtful, intelligent level. They may not know whether I've got every theoretical detail correct or not, but they can hear my logic if I'm explaining it well. So I've found a lot of value in learning how to talk about my research with some of these other friends over lunch and just getting their feedback on it. If I can't present what I'm doing that clearly to someone, to one of my colleagues, not in my specific area, and make myself understood, then, how well do I really know what I'm doing? So, and a lot of great ideas come out of that, because sometimes you get so narrow in your focus on one little research idea and somebody pops up with a question across the table that really springs open a new window that you just had not even lifted your eyes to take a look at. And so it's very useful.
Kind of picking up of what you can go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, picking up of what Carol is just saying about talking to other colleagues, the type of research I do doesn't usually have deadlines. Ideas can sit. And so one of the hardest problems I had early on in my career was having ideas for papers to write or research to do, and then getting into the middle of the school year, and then at the next next semester thinking, oh yeah, I had that idea 5 months ago. What was I going to do with that? And so learning how to work within the cycle of the academic year to realize I'm not going to be writing every week of the semester. I just can't. But how do I mentally sustain the project? How do I keep my head in the game during the academic year so when the time does come back up, where now I have a couple weeks where the tests are back, I can do a little bit more research in these 2 weeks. How do I make sure I'm ready to go and I don't have to kind of start from scratch again? And so one of the things that I've learned to do is schedule weekly or every other week meetings with a colleague where we can talk about, even if it's Mary and we're talking about the actual project that we're working on, but sometimes it's a different colleague and we're each just sharing our research. And so the more I have to talk about it, the more I'm thinking and working on the ideas, even if I'm not actually sitting down to write anything yet. So scheduling those conversations, I think, can be really helpful. And since in my discipline I'm not often working with deadlines, I've had to learn how to kind of schedule artificial deadlines. And one thing that works for me is to look for conferences and seminars and submit a proposal for a paper, and then, the conference rolls around and you've got to actually write the paper. But then once you've written a paper, good, that's of a good enough quality to present to somebody for 20 minutes, then it's actually not too hard to turn that into something you can submit to a publisher. So to kind of schedule artificial deadlines that way.
That's good. That's good. When I come from the University of Minnesota, is where I got my PhD, and the expectation is you will do research. And I was quite frankly asked, why do you want to go teach at Bethel? You prepared for research. And it was very interesting because I took it as a challenge. Okay, I'll show you. I can do research at Bethel. And so it's kind of fun, and, but it also is challenging. And I'm going to be honest, I'm a very upfront person. I think some of the ways that Bethel has been extremely supportive are I've had a sabbatical and I've had a course release. And one of my initial requests for a course release was denied. And I had to go back and explain how intense this work was that I was doing, and give an example of a prior paper, and then, oh, okay, I get it, now you can have a course release. And I think, we just, like Carol was saying, we have to be able to speak each other's languages to the extent that we can, that we can know whether or not it's worthy of course release. And so I'm very appreciative of that. That was very helpful. One of the ways, I think a few years ago, I talked to Joel Fredrickson about a Center for Statistical Support at this university, or analytical support. Let me rephrase that because it might not all be quantitative, and just to have some resources and how we could do that with taking with ad hoc TEUs or something like that, because we don't always know how much a department is going to need that support. So who's going to fund it? Where's the money going to come? We talked about having a retired adjunct statistician or something like that. It hasn't come about. I still want to throw it out again. And what I've been able to do, let's talk about research cash coupons. One thing that I do is I have Joel Fredrickson as my statistician in exchange for authorship. I don't know what if that fits in the category, but Joel is a wonderful statistician, and he gets what you're trying to say, even if you're from two different disciplines. And so that has been a wonderful collaboration, because I don't have necessarily a lot of money in my grant for a statistician, and I'm not at a research-intensive university where I have that. As well. The other thing we don't have here is someone helping write the budgets on a big grant, which of course other research-intensive universities have, and so it can be really hard to try to do that. Now we do have a process now where you need to submit your plan for the research and the grant now. It used to be Sandy Clark. And now I'm not sure who's doing that, but it's the Office of Development, right? Or Dibs. Yeah. And I'll just be very, very open here. I've been able to bypass that because I have all my funding go through a lineup, and so then I don't pay that extra percentage for Bethel to manage my money. On the other hand, I have to use Alana's IRB, which is incredibly more intensive than Bethel's IRB. So I'm one of those people that I do human subjects research outside of Bethel, and so I have a huge amount of hoops to jump through. So my timelines are very much forced upon me for getting things done.
Actually, it's probably good that you're using this IRB.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so then I get a deferral
Since
letter.
my mother might be in your next.
Your mother might be. So I get a deferral letter from Bethel's IRB. That's how that works then. And Peter's wonderful to work with.
That's Peter Jankowski.
Jankowski. Jay.
That certainly resonate with a lot of what's been said, and I guess if I was going to summarize then, kind of the two broad areas that I think about in terms of this research thing is one, managing resources, time and funds, and two, integrating, or at least caring for relationships that touch on that. And in terms of the management of resources, time, I think you're hearing a lot as a major one here. How that's looked for me is just getting to know everything from what hours of the day do I produce best. Unfortunately for me, that's from 10 at night till 3 in the morning. That's been a challenge because that's not when my wife is up. And so that's where time for me and then family management and integration has been a long conversation for years, and we finally got a rhythm where that works now. But it took a lot of support from my wife for that to have happen, and for me to realize I can't be doing that every night from 10 till 3. Then more seasonal
That's
things.
age. That's your age.
Takes a while? Okay. I'd say then summers just become so key. I mean, it's like I've convinced myself that nothing changes in the summers except the allotment. I'm not at Bethel, I'm in the library or in my office. And that just keeps 3 straight months almost of really pretty intense time. And like you, blocks are so much more important than an hour here or there. The conference thing has been really crucial for me. For about 15 years, I had this commitment to attend the annual conferences every year, but every second year at least produce a paper, and that paper on the off year becomes at least an article or a chapter or something like that. And that was a really nice rhythm to keep going for a while. Collaboration has been absolutely huge. I'd say probably 80% of what I've done has been co-authored or co-edited. What that's allowed me to do is really shine where my gifts are and admit where they're not, and find collaborators for whom that's a good fit. I love researching. I like less the writing process. And so I have 2 partners that I write a lot with who love the writing process and hate the research. And we do really well together. I'm also that kind of researcher who can fall into a vortex and emerge a decade later and go, I've written nothing. But I know a lot now. And working with these people, it's like, no, this year we're getting something done. And it's like, that's been super helpful. And finally, I'd say just don't have any other hobbies. As a one-dimensional person, I do a lot of writing.
I would like to share 2 things that I'm thinking about a lot in scholarship here. And the first is, I guess, sort of a challenge. Do we think big enough? You know, if you're, at least in chemistry, if you're a professor at the University of Minnesota and you have a research plan, it has to work, more or less, or you're not going to get tenure, right?
Yep.
And you know, we have limited time, but we have very great freedom in that regard. And the subject areas are almost completely unlimited. And I wonder if we had the courage to try something with small probability of success, if there wouldn't be the potential for something really remarkable to occur. And I don't even know what that would be, but that's something I've been thinking about lately. Certainly in my own work, I have not been thinking on challenges like that. The second thing has to do with the sustainability of what I've been doing now for 14 years. I don't know if all the time I put into research was worth it, with all the costs on my family and summers away and everything. But I think, pretty much know that it's not sustainable. And so what I've been thinking about is how can we get some more research into our curriculum itself so that we don't have our full standard teaching load and our students don't have their full standard course load, and then we add on research or internship more or less as an appendage. And I see the obstacles. There are many obstacles. One is our own compulsion to put as much as possible into the classes that we teach. And another one is the external accreditors and reviewers that our programs have to satisfy. So I don't know if those can be overcome, but that's what I'm thinking about in my spare brain cycles at the moment. How could we put the high-impact practices of doing research and teaching research more directly into the curriculum, and can we do it in a way that does not just result in additional work?
Funding. How do you get the cyclical funding for something like that?
One of the things that I do in that regard is I routinely find students who want to do directed studies on the research that I'm doing. And so if I have a research project that I want to develop over the next 6 months to a year in my classes, I'll look for students who I think would be good for that. And I approach them and ask them if they'd like to work on it with me. What they get out of it is 400 level credit in computer science, which they need. And what I get out of it is a couple things. Of course, it's their contribution to it. But the other thing is artificial deadlines that you were talking about. Because this semester, it's Tuesday, I'm meeting with 2 guys, and they're coming tomorrow, and they're going to say, what are we doing? And here's the stuff we did from last week, and what are we doing for next Tuesday? And it forces me to sort of get my head out of the classroom for a minute and focus back on the problem, because they need credit for this course, and I have to give them a real experience in the course. So to some degree, that.
How about you? Do you get credit?
I wanna know.
The only thing I get is I get the artificial deadlines,
Okay.
and I also get usually within the last month we actually start to make some traction. At this point, we're just doing literature review so that they can figure out what the heck I'm talking about.
Is the work eased because of your...
No. But
or
it
is
happens.
more?
The work happens. Otherwise,
Is
it
it
wouldn't happen.
more work if you were working by yourself?
Yeah, it's more work often working with the students because of the amount of background information I need to give them. I need to find small, self-contained problems they can work on that they can understand, even seniors. And but it's worth it for me, because by the end of the spring, I'll actually be somewhere that I wouldn't have been otherwise. And so that's the value in it for me. I know that directed studies don't pay anything, but that would be a nice thing to see sometime in the future. I mean, if I had 3-4 students taking a directed study, that's almost critical mass for what you can offer at a senior level seminar.
How about a summer directed study program that has a course?
Then
Then you could have 3
Yeah.
people take it and get some paid.
So, the cash, do you have a C for time?
Chronos.
Commitment time?
Yeah, just commitment. Commitment is manifested by time. That's how we operationalize it.
I think, I have a lot of mixed feelings about this as I hear everyone talk, because I feel like part of the answer to the fact that I pour myself into teaching service and scholarship means I'm sacrificing more than some of the people being paid the same amount sacrifice for their jobs. And I don't, I say this too, well, I don't know, I just remembered we're being videotaped. But anyway, this year especially, it just really, opening the contract letter with the same letter again. Thank you for your good service to this institution, but we cannot pay you for what you do. At some point you have to sort of decide, are you passionate enough about the ideas? Do you love the research enough that you're going to figure out how to keep doing it? But the honest answer is that something gets sacrificed. Because it's not, it's not fairly compensated. So, yeah.
And I do still have hobbies. I won't give all mine up, especially in the summertime. I'll work on something. I'll try to finish a paper or whatever is going on, but I think I've reached a point of acceptance. It's taken 24 years, however many I'm getting under my belt now, to reach that point that it may be all right if it's just finishing up one manuscript. That summer, that'll be what it is going to be. I won't invest the entire summer.
Yeah.
Although I somewhat respect that, Paul, but
I'm just not interested in anything else.
I can't do it,
Yeah, things take longer. I have kids that are school age, so absolutely I can't spend the whole summer doing that. Absolutely
Right.
not. Things take longer. But I also try to get a little bit of, I get satisfaction out of the research. I love, especially if I have a project that really has practical significance. But I also try to work into presenting at conferences at nice places. So that I give myself a reward. So, for example, next week I am presenting a poster at the International Society of Heart and Lung Transplantation, and it happens to be in San Diego. And I noticed that, actually, when I submitted. So I do need to go a few days early as well for the week.
How many days?
Because, the time change.
Yeah, the time change. Yeah, get used to that. And I mean, what it means is that you're working overtime getting ready for that, so that you put some course online, or you've traded with a buddy for their skills group, So the work isn't less because I'm gone. It means I front-end loaded myself, but then that's kind of reward that I like. I just want to speak to Edgren, which we haven't mentioned. Edgren is a fabulous one, which I know Sarah's done, and Connie Clark has done, and Edgren most recently with one of our seniors, Maria, and with Bernie, and that is a succinct time frame. And you got your manuscript out, and that was just work from last summer, right, Connie?
Yeah, we met about once a week, or maybe twice a week.
Last semester. During the school
last
year.
semester and all through the summer.
Yeah.
I'll throw in a plug for a Fulbright, applying for a Fulbright award too. I was fortunate enough to get a Fulbright Research Award. Moved my whole family to Oslo, Norway. Spent 6 months there, did reading research in Norway, and absolute phenomenal experience. And they paid for my whole family to go there and live there, and it was incredible. And then came back, told Marge Schaefer a little bit about it. Marge applied for a research award as well, got that, and so there's, they sound like these big prestigious things, which they certainly are, but it's a possibility.
So it's not prestigious because you got it?
Well, I kind of wondered, actually. But it's, we can get these things too, being in Bethel, and it's an amazing organization. I just have tremendous respect for it. It's a possibility too. When I was kind of thinking about this panel, it was really a daunting task to think who to invite here, because we've got so many really capable researchers. But one of the thought processes, and Kathy heard me going through this a little bit when I was deciding, was picking folks that really still are committed to teaching. That's still something of importance to you. You value it. You do a good job with it. I'd be curious to hear some thoughts about that. You talk about sacrifices you need to make to do research. How teaching could be one of those sacrifices you make, and maybe it is to some degree. But I'd be curious to hear how you think about that teaching role, which is really important at Bethel, yet still your commitment to research and to your discipline. How do you resolve some of those things, and how do you deal with that? Because I know you still want to be good in the classroom. You still care about your students. You care about your research. So how do you think about that?
Something similar to Brian, one of the choices that I made probably 2 or 3 years into my career was kind of in my idea of the papers I would write post-dissertation. I actually didn't write those papers. Instead, I ended up working on things that were related to what I was teaching, and or things I could experiment with in the classroom, to kind of continue to fuel that. And I don't miss those things that I haven't written. I have found that I really enjoy the current stream of research that I'm currently doing, but I think it only works because it directly relates to teaching.
Mine indirectly relates to what I teach, but I found a couple little tricks that I'll throw in here. One is that if I'm keeping up on my field, on cognitive psychology in general, I'll be looking through the table of contents that come every month, for the main journals that I track. And then I'll be looking for things that I might want to use in class, but I will see the things that relate directly to what my research is on too. And I grab those articles right then and tuck them away, even if I'm not going to be writing until the summer or sometime. But if they're there, and I've got them already tucked away in my computer, and you got to stay organized to do that. I have found this is one task where I'm like Kristen and Paul. I work in blocks of time, but the one thing that I can just kind of intermingle with what else I'm doing for teaching is this process of finding the stuff I need to read, right? And then I set it aside and it's there, and when I'm ready to work on it, I can just pull out the articles and start working on them. So that's one thing I do, and then I was going to mention one other thing, but now it flew out of my head.
Because your recall stopped, you're in an Edward.
Yeah.
Just wait, it'll
Well,
come.
it may come back to me. I'll stop there, and then it may come back to me what else I was going to add.
I'll just say, use your resources as effectively as you can, and that includes using your research librarians to help you with your lit reviews. And they might need, it might need to be padded out with some, nuances that are in your field, but and use your TAs as wisely as you can. I actually am fortunate enough to teach mostly with tests that can go through Scantron. I'm sorry, I'm not grading a lot of essays like you, and so that way I'm very fortunate to be able to utilize time effectively for teaching. I try to give it all in my classroom, and I try to relate to how practice has changed based on evidence. And we had a paradigm shift, I believe, because last week, one of my students on her clinical self-evaluation, one of the questions uses evidence to direct nursing practice. And she wrote in there, well, don't we all? And I thought, we've finally come to the point where it's natural. We don't have to convince this generation that our practice should be based on research. And so that does pull together, and I think the loop is closing then. The students understand the reason I do research is because we want to make sure we're providing the most evidence-based care that's best for our patients.
I remembered the other thing I was going to add.
Oh, good.
Because I teach a course in research methods, right, to our psychology students. And one of the things that I try to make sure to do is tell them what I'm working on as we go along. They have to do their little research projects in one semester, but at least because, the whole thing is about modeling, and even if they aren't really working on that particular project with me, they'll have their own ideas they want to pursue. But it shows them that we're still learners too, that this is now the shape that our own studies take, is this kind of research process. And they're still students, but if they're going to be lifelong learners, they pick this up and hopefully continue it. So I try to kind of show them as much as I can of what I'm working on at the time, or tell them what my current project is and what I'm doing on it. That kind of thing.
Well, any final thought? There's another class waiting to come in here right in 5.
I have two.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's good.
One is an idea that I picked up in graduate school, and that is, and I suppose you can do it digitally. Back then there was no such thing. Was to have your idea notebook, your research notebook of ideas that you can keep track of, having that folder where you're throwing things in that make sense to your topic. And then the other piece is, I certainly respect the need blocks of time kind of thing. I would tag on to that the suggestion from the research that says if you can give even a max of 15 minutes a day in which you are setting aside, maybe reviewing your ideas, maybe just some way of connecting with the work that you're doing, so that when you have that block of time, you're not starting from ground zero again, but you're actually, it's there processing. So those are those two ideas.
Good. Well, thanks again to panelists. Really appreciate it. And those that were here, those that are going to join us through video too. Like I said, we'll be back again April 28th, same time, same place, and then getting a little bit more into kind of research methodologies and maybe a little more specific, some helpful tips that you'd have to share. I'll probably bring a couple wild card questions to the table next time as well too, so we'll play with those a little bit.
Research based.
Well, they actually will be. So ready to
Get a hobby between now and then.
yeah. So we'll do that. But again, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.